Hi there, this is John. Welcome to another episode of Old Guy Career Change. I've got some improvements this week. I bought a tripod for the camera, so see, no hands. So that's good. So the camera shouldn't be moving around quite so much. I also decided, taking a look at video production, that I'm going to stick with iMovie. iMovie is free, and the thought of buying Final Cut Pro for these things was just too much. So if I can't do it in iMovie, I'm not going to do it. In the first three videos, I should say, or just as a clarification, I'm talking about some recent experiences. Soon I'll be talking about my career thinking and the career change that I will or will not be undertaking in real time. And so, again, I'm doing this in the interest of sharing, helping other people who stumble along this path and encounter their own career transitions at a certain point in time. So how did I get here? I was laid off in January, and I was working for a startup company. I was in a database operations kind of job, which was a change from my career. I've been a back-end developer. This job sort of was opportunistic. It kind of fell into my lap. There were some of us in our then prior employer who were all looking for a job at the same time. We've all worked with each other for 3, 4, 5 years. We were really tight. We were good friends. And this new team was starting up in a certain startup company. And one thing led to another, and we all interviewed to go into that team, and we were hired. In addition, there was a really great person out from Chicago who was also hired into the team. We integrated really well. We're friends. We're real friends. I mean, outside of work, we're friends. And the team had at the time a lot of camaraderie, a lot of, all for one for all feeling, which I super enjoy, and everyone was sharp. Fundamentally, though, I didn't like the job. I learned a lot. Huge amount of stuff came into my head that otherwise wouldn't have. There's certain assumptions you make, there's certain abstractions that you use, I should say, as a back-end developer that you completely pierce when you're actually responsible for the care and feeding of a database. And I was paid really well. I learned a lot. I loved my immediate team, but fundamentally the job was not as interesting, as much fun, as exciting, as involving as my prior back-end developer jobs had been. Nonetheless, I was pulling my weight and super enjoyed the folks I was working with. And we did a lot of good stuff. We saved that company well over $1 million in annual fees up at Amazon for their databases because of how they were configured and set up prior to our starting. I wasn't responsible for the cleverness that thought of a way to save a lot of money, but I took part in the tactical aspects of implementing stuff to make it happen. So we did good for the company. We were working well together. We were super responsive. We were, reasonably pumped up about the company's prospects. And in January, the company laid off 20% of its employees. My team was whacked 50%. So think about that for a second. The average, layoff percentage across the entire company was 20%. My team that worked really well and that saved the company a lot of money had a 50% layoff rate. So I guess somewhere at some level in the senior leadership team, there was the perception that there was excessive fat in our organization, excessive, unneeded talent. Now, nobody ever says, hey, it was a good thing that I got laid off. Nobody ever says, I was overhead and the company was right to get rid of me. Right? I mean, okay, there are some corner cases where people are happy to be laid off because they get a severance, but I'm talking in the normal run-of-the-mill case. So clearly I am biased. Clearly, I'm too close to the layoff since I was one of the people laid off to render an objective opinion. Nonetheless, I think the layoff was a fuck up. So that's how I got to where I am. And so the next day I started a traditional job search. So really briefly, I updated my resume and the LinkedIn profile. I limited the stuff on the resume to 20 years. I contacted headhunters. I let colleagues know and friends know. I updated everything on the LinkedIn jobs board, Indeed, Ada, and a few others. And I made sure I responded quickly to any inquiries that came in. And I was, looking for a back-end engineering job working mostly in Python. And here are the results down at the bottom. I sent out 277 resumes, applications. That's about 62 a month. My round one conversion rate was 18%, which I think is very good in this job market anyway. So 1 out of every 5 applications resulted in the recruiter coming back and saying, hey, let's talk. I feel good about that. It means that what's on the resume and what's on the LinkedIn profile are opening doors, are getting recruiters at companies interested. And the conversion rates on the remaining rounds were pretty good, except for round 4, conversion rate of only 16%. And I should be clear here, by round, I mean interviews occurring sort of in parallel or scheduled in parallel. So if there's one interview, that's one round. If then the recruiter or the company comes back and says, for the next round, for the next interviews, we want you to do have a system design test and then a coding test and then a cultural interview test, and we're going to all schedule them now and they're going to happen on the same day. The way I think of them, that's all 3 of those constitute one round. So just a single round here is at least one and sometimes more than one interview, and typically that was the case for rounds 3 and 4. However, the net is 0 offers out of 277 resumes, which kind of sucks. And so that was after about 4.5 months. And so, I started to think, what's going wrong here? What do I do? Let me give you some vignettes first, though. So one company ghosted me after 3 rounds. I sent them a very nice follow-up about a week after the last communication, heard nothing. Then I sent them another follow-up about a week after that, very nice, very polite. Hey, what's going on? Just wanted to know. Nothing. Ghosting after 3 rounds. I think it's okay to ghost someone after 1 round, or maybe after 0 round, but not after you've basically done 2 one-hour interviews after the recruiter interview. I really think that's poor form. Another company asked me to give a 90-minute presentation on a past project, which I spent 2 days making the slide deck and wordsmithing it. And that was after 6 interview rounds, totaling 8 hours. And after all that, they told me that they weren't sure I had what it took to do system design. That's even though I architected a company's entire product. So yeah, okay, sure. One other company said they didn't hire people who were laid off. So in the interview, I mentioned I was laid off from my previous employer, blah, blah, blah. The answer comes back, well, we don't want to hire laid off people. So, karma's a bitch, and I am sure that the person who said that will be laid off, or at least there's a high probability of that, sometime in the next 20 years. And when it happens, I hope they happen to think back to the feedback they gave me and feel a little metallic taste in the back of their throat. Another company I interviewed with had single word names for everyone. They were a bunch of tech bros, and on their website, they had these weird single word gaming names for themselves, and they referred to them that way in the Zoom call, and they were horrible communicators. The guy who interviewed me, coding test, asked me to write Python as though it was C because he didn't know Python, and every 5th word was the word like. So, I think I dodged a bullet there. Another company passed me with flying colors through 5 interviews. The last interview was with the senior VP of engineering, and this is in a small company, so my antenna started buzzing. Why does a small company have a senior VP of engineering? Anyway, this guy ultimately rejected me because of cultural differences, and we're a remote company, and I knew something was odd, just like 1 minute into the interview with him, it just seemed off. And so, okay, I've been working remote for 3 companies over a total of 8 years, but yeah, cultural differences. 4 companies pulled the role that I was interviewing for because of changing companies' priorities and schedules. So when confronted with these job search results, the first thing to do is to try to understand it and to try to get to the bottom of why and to try to make the situation better. The only reaction that's not appropriate would be one of anger or resentment. Those would be completely illogical. This is a problem to be solved. You've got some information coming in, you've got data coming in, you've got results coming back from your efforts, and if they're not what you expect, you need to think about it dispassionately and figure out what the problem is. So the thoughts that come to mind as to why I wasn't getting job offers, the first thought was, well, I was looking for a specific kind of job. I had come across many companies that were looking for back-end development, but with a language other than Python. For example, in Golang or in Rust. And I didn't want to work in those languages, at least not at the time, right? I mean, as the job search continues, one's parameters can get changed, usually relaxed, right? Until you finally sync up with the market and you get the offer. But at this time, or when the search was going on and I was contemplating why no offers, I didn't want to relax my constraints yet. So I was looking for a specific kind of role. My most recent experience in the database team wasn't quite on point with what I was looking for. If I had interviewed for, or if I were searching for an infrastructure job or a database administration / management / performance scaling kind of job, my most recent job experience would have been very on point. Another thing that, of course, can be the case is, there were better candidates than me, as hard as that is to believe. It could also be the case that I lost jobs because of chemistry differences, because of, not that I rubbed someone the wrong way, but maybe an interviewer was more in sync with a certain other candidate than with me. You can sometimes have cases, especially with tests, where if you don't say exactly the right thing that the interviewer is expecting, sometimes that can really hurt. So for example, if the interviewer says, all right, take a look at the system diagram, what can you think of for improvements in performance? If you had to look at something, what would you look at? And maybe your first inclination is to talk about memcached and Redis and using caching to improve performance and to reduce latency and reduce loading on the back-end database, et cetera, et cetera. Well, maybe the interviewer really wanted you to start talking about database denormalization and indexing and database improvements. And so the fact that you didn't go there as your first answer will be a negative on your interview results. This is all very silly, right? Because the fact is, in a real job, in a real company, if there was a performance problem, it wouldn't just be one person fixing it, it would be a team effort, and you would discuss alternatives, and there'd be a review of the alternatives, and you'd do some proof of concepts, and you'd take some measurements, and you'd do experimentation, and then you would decide, and by the way, it wouldn't be you, it'd be you and one or two other people. Hey, it looks like the biggest bang for the buck, is to fix this. And after we do that, let's take measurements again, and then let's do that, right? So nothing is done in isolation. All of this is just kind of odd anyway, but that's the way interviewing happens. So, could be all that, could be chemistry, could be phase of the moon. I sort of came to the realization midway through all this that ageism is probably a factor. I don't like to think about it. I don't like to think about age. Normally I don't. When I'm a member of a team, I'm a member of a team, and I don't care if someone is in their 20s or 30s or my age. It doesn't matter, right? It's just a number, and what matters is how you are internally and whether you can get the job done. However, I could not deny that, I'm 66. I don't look like I'm 22, and at least not in base 10. And, ageism discrimination is something that you can very rarely prove. You sort of know it in your gut. If something happens once or twice, you say, well, it could just be a random coincidence, who knows? But when something happens 5 or 6 or 10 or 277 times, you start to think, you start to wonder. And I very reluctantly came to the conclusion, not that ageism was the major factor I don't know that, but I think the probability is that it was a factor. And so now what do I do with all this information, with all this thinking? The oddity of my situation is that I am in the precipice of being able to retire, right? Due to some past not so great investment decisions, I cannot just retire right now and not ever work again. But then again, when I retire, I'm the kind of guy that I wouldn't want to sit around and just watch movies all day anyway. I'd want to be doing something. I'd want to be involved with something. I'd want to be building and creating something and working with other people on some creative endeavor. So I would be doing stuff anyway. So the fact that I might have to work part-time or work part of the year in order to facilitate a comfortable retirement the way my wife and I want to live is not a big deal to me, because I'd be doing stuff anyway. Another aspect of this is that to whatever extent ageism is an issue, it will only get worse as time goes on. That's unavoidable. If it's not an issue now, it will be. If it is an issue now, it'll be more of an issue. And so I started to think about this as a transition point where I have multiple forks in the road. I see them only if I want to see them. I certainly take them only if I want to take them. I would evaluate them only if I want to. If I don't want to see them, if you believe, for example, all of the stuff you read on LinkedIn, well, forget it. We would just continue with the full-time job search, and you'd read all these aphorisms on LinkedIn about positivity and visualizing your success and the difference between managers and leaders and all that nonsense. And you would be pumped up every day, and you'd go to LinkedIn and you'd get your pump up of positivity, and you'd go forth and you'd continue pushing on the full-time job search. That's one approach. And to some people, it's the right approach. It didn't feel right to me. For one thing, I don't like a lot of the stuff on LinkedIn these days. And for another, I just think it closes off avenues of growth that are there and should at least be considered, explored and considered, instead of pretending that they're not there at all. So I started to think, what do I do with this full-time job search? And so that's where we got to this book here, which a very good friend recommended to me. And I decided this is my transition point. I chose it, all right? It was thrust upon me by the layoff, or at least the environment was thrust upon me, but I made an active choice to embark on a transition. And I respectfully suggest, if you're in anywhere near the same situation as me, that you do the same. There were many good ideas in this book. And so this quote from the book really resonated with me. To become something else, you have to stop being what you are now. To start doing things a new way, you have to end the way you are doing them now. And to develop a new attitude or outlook, you have to let go of the old one you have now. Even though it sounds backward, endings always come first. The first task is to let go. There were a couple of other good ideas in this book, notably about this area between endings and beginnings being what the author calls the neutral zone or the gray zone in different places. And that's what I'm in right now. But this notion really, really resonated with me. So now let me close the video by telling you of my decisions. My full-time job search is still in force. I will still engage with headhunters and with recruiters if they contact me about a particular opening, and I'll evaluate them, and if they are really enticing, I'll go apply to them. But I'm not going to be sending out my resume or contacting recruiters directly anymore. The outreach part of the full-time job search I'm suspending. I'm going to keep my existing job profiles up, and I'm going to hope that lightning strikes. I'm going to hope that a really enticing, wonderful full-time position comes along, but I'm not going to count on it anymore. And it's not even really my top priority anymore. So I want to make it clear, if it happens, fantastic, I would love it. But I am going to open myself up to other possibilities. Possibility number one is what I've already done, which is to start a consulting company. And it's a one-person company, of course, one-person LLC. And I did this on the recommendation of multiple friends, and I'll talk about that in the next video. The good news is I already have a gig, and I have 2 other gigs lined up, and this is great. And I'll talk more about how I feel about that and what I've noticed about it in the next video. The other thing I'm doing is to consider a third possibility, which is doing something completely new and different, opening myself up to the possibility of choosing an Act 3, a third career for myself. My first career was as a hardware engineer. My second career was as a software engineer, and I just kind of tripped into that accidentally. I didn't even think about it as a new career or a different career at the time, but that's what it was. So this would be career number 3. And it'll mean possibly reinventing myself, depending upon what it is. It could be in tech, it could be in software, computers, or it could be something else. I don't know yet, but I'm going to, I guess I owe it to myself to fully embrace this transition period and to take a look at it. And I'll be covering that in two or three videos from now. So thank you for watching. Please click the subscribe button and ask me any questions that you have in the comments, and I will reply. Take care.